I want to welcome everyone. I really enjoyed the welcoming the other day of talking a lot about Portland. I welcome you to our lovely city. I've actually only been here for about 3 years, so despite my best attempt in attempting to fit in, I'm just not able to grow a beard. So I have a bit of a challenge in fitting in physically, I guess, around here. I also want to thank IAP2, specifically Lance Robertson and Sherry Watland, for this invitation to participate in this conversation. As the introduction kind of talked about, my career has shifted quite a bit. And I want to talk a little bit about that journey and about that story over my career in journalism. Before that, I want to talk again about Portland. I'm glad I have a little bit of pull still at the New York Times because I asked them to do 36 hours of Portland just for this conference. And what did they publish yesterday? 36 hours for Portland. So if you get a chance to, I kid, I didn't do that. But if you do get a chance to hang out in our city for a couple days after this conference, there's a great Times article, exploring what you can do here in Portland for 56 hours. But I would say and argue that it's going to take more than 36 hours to eat through Portland. So give your stomach some room and give some time as well. I also want to encourage you guys to explore more than what they offered. There's a great venue, a J District, where the Asian American community is really based out in the east side of Portland. Also recently, there's a Support Black-Owned restaurant event that happened. If you follow that link, which I can provide later, there's got a list of great restaurants that's been Black-owned, so it's a great way to support the local economy. So, as you can see here, I'm also providing links to bit.ly URL. So everything I'm going to talk about today in terms of projects is going to be available at that link. In fact, I'll go ahead and I'll tweet that back channel right now. And if you follow me or follow the hashtag, that URL is also available now. So, I know there's been, for me, I love to operate in the intersection between blending digital tools and enhance it through analog experiences. Just like Dennis mentioned at lunch yesterday, our adversaries are using digital tools, right? We better master them too. So I love to practice what I really believe in terms of blending those digital tools. In fact, in planning this session with Lance and Sherry, we wanted to really use a mobile web app that my company developed called Harvest as a part of engaging folks here during this presentation. So you probably may have noticed on the table to go ahead and log in if you can. We'll use it for only 5 minutes or so, but it's a good opportunity to just get a little bit of insights of where people are coming from and so forth. So just be prepared for that. And also, again, like I said, follow the Twitter back channel as we can. So, again, I was asked to talk a little bit about my journey as a journalist, and more specifically as a interactive storyteller. And what I find extremely interesting is, despite my career and focus on how we, evolve storytelling so it allows people to interact with it. I mean, I've seen Rhett mentioned 1.8 million as one of my projects that I was involved with at the New York Times. So it's the one that's in the middle over there. I also was proud of one other project called A Year of War that came out during my tenure there. Now I'll talk a little bit about a project that I helped launch called Snowfall. And I'll give you a little bit of backstory to that. But one of the things that I find interesting, especially when I talk about my journey, is the fact that I've dedicated most of my journalism career in how do we engage with the content on the screen. And I enjoy doing that because we really push the boundaries around interactive storytelling. But as I'm transitioning from the newsroom to what I'm doing now at the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication, I'm really drawn less about how we interact with the screen, but more so how we interact with each other because of the storytelling, because of the narrative that's happening on the screen. So reflecting on the title of this session, innovation and engagement in the evolving media landscape, I think it would behoove me not to mention the New York Times Innovation Report because of its relevance in the media industry, but also because it's an interesting approach of how they define innovation. I don't know if folks are folks familiar with the Innovation Report. All right, so I'll back up a little bit. So this came out in 2014, and about a dozen or so, I would say about almost 20 journalists, as well as folks from the business side, spent 3 months really focusing on how do we evolve, or how do they evolve. I was no longer there when the report came out. How do we involve the New York Times and really address the need for innovation? So there was a lot of great outcomes from that. So I did point, again, to the URL that I created, I did point to this innovation report, so you can get access to that as well. So no Googling at this moment necessary. But it was supposed to be an internal report, so it got leaked out to the industry, which was great, because I think it was such a pivotal moment for media to kind of be self-reflective of what it would take to move the traditional print newsroom into the digital ecosystem. And when I saw the report, I would argue that I would agree 95% of what was in that report, as much as I believed in it 5 years ago, before that report came out. So there was a lot of good things that came out. One of the things that was interesting was this one project that they pointed out to as a great example of interactive storytelling. So Snowfall came out, and Ray, show of hands for folks familiar with Snowfall. All right, I'm going to show this one as well, because let me just go ahead and launch it. So I thought this was a pretty amazing project in its form of interactive storytelling. It was a story about some skiers who went down Tunnel Creek, where there was an enormous avalanche, where several of the skiers ended up passing because of it. So it was a gut-wrenching story of both risk and survival and the people that were left behind. So it was a great opportunity when this project landed on my desk in the fall of 2014, or in the summer of 2014, where we wanted to explore what might that look like, right? And as you're going through the story, interactive components simply goes up and does not disrupt the interactive storytelling. Then you can continue reading the story. So it was great. So when this came out, a lot of people talked about it because it would argue that it was truly innovating the form of storytelling that we can do online. Another great example of some of the use was explaining how the descent happened. And as you're going through the story, there's a way to actually walk through that and reading the narrative and see how the graphics also get shifted. So, just a little bit of a backstory of how this came about. And one of the things that I guess frustrates me, because the innovation report came out and said, people from the industry said, we want a button that makes a snowfall, right? As if it only takes a button to make snowfall. Other than, truth be known, it was actually, it took several journalists and technologists and designers to be able to produce this in a 6-month span. So there was a lot of commitment in making this happen. But when people talk about the innovation of this, they often talk about the presentational innovation. But I've always argued that the innovation that happened here at the New York Times for Snowfall happened months before it was published. So here's the story: was that when the package came in on my desk, Because it was written by John Branch, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, he had great access to the characters and to the story of Snowfall. It was immediately an opportunity for us to engage with the rest of the newsroom and also to engage with the sports department. So, as I usually do, when some big package comes along, I usually collaborate. I like to collaborate across the newsroom. So, one of my colleagues, Steve Duenas, who runs the graphics department, sat down and said, we want to go big on this. He said, this is a good opportunity. So we called in a meeting with Joe Sexton, who was the sports department's editor, and we pitched our idea. We said, we really want to go big. The story is an opportunity to really kind of push the boundaries of interactive storytelling. And we diagrammed it out, we kind of sketched our idea. And if Joe Sexton, who's quite colorful, if you will, kept listening, and what we told him, there's only one catch for us to be able to do this. You need to be able to edit John Branch's words with you. With you. So, the colorful Joe Sexton pretty much stood up and said, F that, you're not going to touch my reporter's words. And he walked out of the office. So after Steve and I, picked up our jaw and our tongue from the floor, we sort of said, well, next time you do it. 3 days later, his deputy, Jason Stallman, came in and called me and said, I talked to Joe. I told him that you guys have been great collaborators in the past, and he's in. So to me, that moment when I got that call, that moment when Joe said yes, was the innovation. So Joe Sexton actually tells that story in a long form podcast, and I love that quote that he says is that, it's safer to say no. You get second guessed less often if you say no. Your job's not on the line if you say no. But if you're willing to say yes, and you're willing to face the consequences of having said yes, then quite amazing things can happen. So to me, that was the innovation, right? It's this innovation changing the culture in the newsroom and changing it to a culture of saying yes. And also identifying the process win of authentic collaboration. So it's what happens when you have an opportunity to edit the process of the multiple expertise within the newsroom, the words, the graphics, and the multimedia. So this idea of the experts, right, the knowledge within the network really resonates with me, and it resonates with a lot of the conversations that I've heard during the conference. I'm often drawn to Stephen Johnson's book and also his fabulous TED Talk. And he talks about these liquid networks, right? These liquid networks that it's not that the network themselves is smart, it's that the individuals get smarter because they're connected to this network. So this idea of collaboration, this idea of yes, and ultimately this idea of identifying the experts in the room to be able to collaborate together is enormously helpful, enormously powerful. So this idea of breaking down these silos, right? Breaking down the status quo, and to trust the various experts in the room, to me leads to the first point I love to explore is this idea of that authentic collaboration leads to meaningful innovation. Second word in my title is engagement. So I want to take it from the media's point of view in terms of the word engagement. So I'm going to break down that word based on the news ecosystem. So, I referred to the New York Times Innovation Report, and one of the things that I also felt like was felt a little short was this idea of the need of growing their audience, right? Of getting their journalism to readers. Unfortunately, it doesn't recognize the need to connect with an audience in a more meaningful way. And I think it still suffers from this sort of top-down, distributed model of journalism that the industry suffers from today. In fact, 5 months after the innovation report, the Times created a new position and moved an executive from the business side of the organization to become the editor of Outreach. And you can see from the first graph, they even use the word engagement in that first paragraph, right? Engagement with readers. But as you read through the article, you start noticing that the rest of the article mentions the editor's role of using search, social, and other strategies. I consider that as code name as for being data analysis, right? Data analysts, to figure out what people are doing, right? What people were liking, what people were sharing. Again, absent, glaringly absent is the word with. So last month, Media Shift, which is it's a blog, it's a website dedicated to reviewing how traditional media is changing through the digital disruption, posted a story about the rise of engagement editors, which is clearly a priority for many newsrooms across the country, and I would imagine across the globe. You know, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with our founding director at the Agora Journalism Center, and he always refers to this engagement and how the news industry defines engagement, is that most people talk about engagement and has hijacked that word engagement for commercial purposes. In the idea of measures of success has been with likes, with tweets, and with shares. So, you know, I love the idea of trying to get back the word, reclaim the word engagement back to what it really means in terms of, you know, unfortunately the word engagement has somewhat fallen into the same, you know, fate as the word multimedia, in fact, which was the worst title to ever have at the New York Times. Because it was everything. So I love the opportunity to reclaim that word engagement. In fact, in a 2014 report by Rutgers professor Philip Napoli, you know, his title of his report was really measuring media impact, but it mostly focused on documentary films and its impact. But nonetheless, the report was tremendously useful. This is one graph that I'm really drawn to, was this idea that demonstrating the continuum of media engagement. And in one side of the graph is really looking at passive engagement, whereas the other graph is really looking at active engagement. Ethan Zuckerman from MIT actually breaks this down as being thick and thin engagement as well. So it's really some really interesting ways to define that. You know, I suspect that I'm preaching to the choir once again in this room in terms of our need and our hope to really be more active in our engagement, especially through media. Again, in fact, we're reconnecting back to this public participation. You know, I'm drawn to one of the core values, the number one core value that you guys have in terms of P2, as being based on the belief that those who are affected by the decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. I love it. In fact, I love the idea that Anne Devigal from yesterday's morning's keynote had charged the group to find the champion, right? This idea to be able to find the champion to make sure that all those involved had the right in that decision-making process. As I'm exploring ways to think of how to push the Agora Journalism Center, I'm also drawn by other people's work. One of the individuals is a gentleman by the name of Charlie Brown here. He has a company. Charlie Brown. You can get that all the time. Of course, I would never say that in front of him. It's not recorded in the other way, right? Anyway, he has a company here called Context Partners here in Portland, Oregon, and he was also fortunate enough, we were fortunate enough to hear him speak at the Creative Mornings conference, which is a monthly gathering for creatives here in town. It's actually a global movement. But Portland has the opportunity to actually present great speakers. Every month in the morning they get donuts and coffee and they have a speaker. And what's interesting about Charlie Brown in his presentation is because his company actually practices community-centered design, right? Really looking at and flipping the user-centered design approach, but really looking at a community-driven and community-centered design approach. So imagine him talking to a room full of creatives and leads a conversation, and it basically says why being a hero, in this case a creative hero, is bullshit, right? It's this idea that you as a creative hero, and your responsibility to be the guy who comes up with creative ideas at these meetings is all wrong. Because what that individual actually does is gather the knowledge of the group, of the community. So it was just fascinating to watch him debunk this creative hero and to refocus on finding that champion within your community. I'm also drawn by other movements, especially in the tech, open government and tech world, right? Open data world, in terms of building with, not for. Al McCain has been a great proponent of that. And I'm drawn to the work that they are doing across the country as well, with Code for America, Smart Chicago, and so forth. So the second point I'd love to point out is this, or to stand out, is kind of blending the words that Emmett spoke about on Wednesday, as well as what Anne mentioned, again, with finding this champion, with this idea to find, qualify, and support community champions to build with, and not for. Again, I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but in a media perspectives way, it's still an enormous reach for us to be able to do that. Which comes to my last point of the evolving media landscape. As Dennis Hayes highlighted in yesterday's lunch, the digital revolution spawns real revolutions. And as we witnessed from the Arab Springs in 2011, shots can be heard and seen around the world in an instant. All communication professions are experiencing profound changes in their missions, standards, and relationships. In a world with more freedom of expression and opinion, where the public can broadcast real-time events globally, and when audiences expect to be part of the brand conversation, all communicators must face these challenges with courage, integrity, innovation, and engagement. So that's why last year, the School of Journalism and Communication at the University of Oregon created and launched the Agora Journalism Center, which is the gathering place for innovation in communication and civic engagement. If journalism didn't exist today, it would be created in the limited form it has been practiced in the last 100 years. So journalism must find new ways to be inclusive, relevant, accountable, and sustainable in the digital age. That's our mission. Agora Journalism Center is devoted to transformative advancements for better journalism and a stronger democracy. So you might ask, well, what is a journalism school doing this? To me, having had the opportunity to be part of the conversation, to prepare for this presentation, to meeting folks here, and to literally experience P2 the last couple of days at this conference, I'm inspired by our shared values between P2 and journalism, right? In terms of your core values, number 6, public participation provides participants with the information they need to participate in a meaningful way. Based on the American Press Institute's Journalism Essentials, the purpose for journalism is to provide citizens with the information they need to make the best possible decision about their lives, their communities, their societies, and their governments. I love that journalism's role echoes your core values. In fact, in a project we produced this year, we used this particular purpose to help redefine what journalism could be as a prism through innovative work. So the project we produced, we submitted it to our social media campaign and websites, and we used the hashtag #ThisIsJournalism. It's an opportunity to illuminate emerging forms of journalism in unexpected places. And my editor would not like the fact how I'm going to be extremely disruptive in my transition. So I'm about to show that this is journalism project, but this is also the opportunity to use Harvest. So, again, awful transition. I couldn't figure out a better way to do that.
You can't hear on.
What's that?
I'm in.
All right. Yeah, just like about 50 people are in right now, so it's kind of a small portion. But what you got to keep trying. So one thing is that you can point your mobile browser to harv.is. There's no .com necessary. Okay, so .is is the extension. Once you're in there, you should be able to. So this has been tested with iPhones and Android, not 100% tested on Windows. Sorry. But it is a mobile web app, so it is up to standards in terms of the latest mobile technologies. And once you're in there, you can put in the password IAP2. So just a little bit of background. So Harvest was made specifically for socially focused documentary films, where we turn audiences into participants because of our belief that stories beget stories. And it's always interesting to do this in a live presentation as opposed to a time-based media, but let's give it a shot. So if you were able to get in, one of the first steps is actually to be able to identify who you are in this community, right? So it's possible, I recognize, that you may fulfill more than one role. But we think it's important to identify your primary role in this community. So once you hit save, once you filled out which role you look up, it will automatically move you to the Gestures tab. So the Gestures tab is really, it currently takes 2 swipes. Swipe up and swipe down. So it's not really like Tinder, all right? However, this is an opportunity to, you'll also notice that the gesture takes a little bit getting used to. It's not like how you would swipe up through emails. It's very intentional, and it's also very purposeful, just like the app. And also keep in mind that this gesture engagement is meant to be a heads-up experience. It's supposed to be meant as you're watching a film or watching a presentation, even debates, lectures. But we wanted to minimize that disruption for folks so that it's really a swipe up and swipe down. Hopefully it's a heads-up experience. And then finally is this clarity for engagement, right? Which, again, speaking to the choir of folks really being specific to the reason why you want to engage. So here's the idea, is that at any point during the next few slides, what you see inspires you, swipe up. And at any point that you are concerned about a very particular idea, or you have concerns for it, swipe down. Got it? All right, set this up. I usually have other people doing this with me. I'll try to figure it out. And double checking. Everybody said okay? Now, I see some engagement. Good. Just want to make sure that it kicks in. See a lot of swipes and up and down. Good. Record. All right. So earlier this year, we launched a social media campaign, This is Journalism, and asked people to hashtag projects outside the obvious places of mainstream media. And we welcome examples of traditional media engaging with communities in new ways. This is Journalism is that collection of transformative projects that challenges our definition of journalism and yet continues to serve the functions to enhance public knowledge and civic life. Here are a few examples. Again, as a reminder, you can do this at any time, swiping up and swiping down. There aren't going to be any prompts. So we'll start with the obvious ones. Collaboration. The old distributive model of journalism is inadequate. For the interactive participation people expect in our digital world, people are no longer satisfied to passively consume news. And the definition of journalism must become more expansive if it is to remain relevant. So, for example, the Seattle Times collaboration with Solutions Journalism resulted in the Education Lab, engaging with their readers and reaching education stakeholders who are not regular Times readers has been a focus of Education's Lab from day one. Since launch, they held several community meetings with parents, students, teachers, education advocates to gather ideas and input. They've experimented with new ways to feature community voices, including live chats, reader questionnaires, and regular guest columns. In Seattle. Oakland, California. Oakland Voices at the Tribunes program is to train East Bay residents to tell the stories of their neighborhoods. The Tribune says they created Oakland Voices as a vehicle for community members to become multimedia storytellers and to be new voices directly shaping the coverage of their region. Residents have revealed stories that otherwise might have gone untold. Other resident stories have corrected misconceptions about their community. Thus, news coverage becomes more accurate and more trustworthy. The Bristol Cable in England is a media cooperative created and owned by the people in the city. With free events, multimedia websites, and free quarterly print edition, the Bristol Cable is building tools and platforms for people to engage with their communities and hold power to account in the city and wider society. And finally, in the collaboration area, is the Off-Page Project, which is a collaboration between poets and journalists at the Center for Investigative Reporting, also known as the Reveal now. Living at the intersection of youth voice and civic engagement, the Off-Page Project provides a multimedia platform for young people to investigate the issues of their communities and stories that would otherwise be silenced. Another theme that we recognize during the This is Journalism engagement, there are examples when community members themselves were leveraging digital tools. Just a few examples. So representing a new digital bulletin board, See, Click, Fix is a communications platform for community members to report on non-emergency issues in governments to track, manage, and reply. Ultimately, making communities better through transparency, collaboration, and cooperation. There's another website called Seattle in Progress. Sorry, there's a lot of Pacific Northwest, East Coast. Is a mobile web app for seeing what's being built in Seattle, developed by a single developer who believes that the tech industry urgently needs to make housing for everyone a top priority. The app is a modern-day alternative to the notice of proposed land use boards currently posted across the city. Another theme is the third of several themes but the last one I want to mention is really looking at the ubiquitous impacts of journalism. Because the traditional role of journalism has been to bear witness. The redefinition of journalism must include a re-examination of the standards, ethics, and responsibilities required of both professionals and amateurs. So Witness is a group that trains and supports activists and citizens around the world to use video safely, ethically, and effectively to expose human rights abuse and fight for human rights changes. Similar to Witness is another international group called Video Volunteers that equips women and men in underdeveloped areas with video journalism skills, enabling entire communities to expose underreported stories from their communities and take action to right the wrongs. And in terms of the new investigator, I point you to this one. There are those individuals or groups with the will, passion, and intelligence to pursue where others won't or have not. The one that stands out in this theme is Elliot Higgins, a British citizen blogger and the founder of Bellingcat, who has become a weapons analysis expert and leading source of information on the conflict in Syria. In fact, the New York Times' C.J. Shivers has identified him as a one-man news service. So this is just but a slice of the transformative projects that people across the globe contributed to in our hashtag. An early report is available online, which is also available on the list of links that I showed. Okay. So, let's see how we did. I should also point out, big screen. So it looks like collaboration was definitely high up. Open voices seems to have resonated quite a bit for folks. And so did this be here. Just looking at video volunteers. So again, this is an opportunity to capture your real-time engagement and how folks resonated and perhaps not resonated. I can talk a little bit about Harvest more if there are times for questions at the end. But at the moment, let's proceed. So in terms of the third point, journalism can, and after looking at this, the list of projects that came out of this campaign, I'm left with excitement for what's possible in journalism and how others are pushing the boundaries of the role of journalism. So journalism can and will be done by more people on more platforms and with more variations. So again, I mentioned Mike Fancher, who was the founding director of the Agora Journalism Center. He always would often suggest a sixth W to the 5 W's of journalism, right? The who, what, when, how, and why. I love the idea of him pushing and suggesting adding the W of what's possible. What's possible when we can think beyond the current boundaries. So if you still have Harvest up, you could also go to the third tab. You can actually write a comment. There are 2 questions I'm actually asking of folks. If they are inspired by any of the projects that I presented, I'd love for you guys to suggest new projects, either through that form or I can also provide another link. And also, I want to ask of this from this group as well is, how might you collaborate with the media to help you make deeper connections with your community? I'd love to hear that. What I can do is also gather that input and make that available on the website as well. So I'm going to leave you guys with a few asks. And again, I really appreciated the time, being here, being able to present this, with you during your lunch, but also being a part of the conversation in the last couple of days here at the IAP2 conference. I appreciate the time. But I wanted to really think about ways I can ask of things from you guys. And the first one is an opportunity to collaborate with others beyond the P2 field to explore creative solutions. You know, it's actually echoing a little bit what Kyle Bozenko presented yesterday in terms of, you know, his ask of being able to look outside the dialogues and deliberation field for creative opportunities. And to me, it's this, you know, being able to practice what we preach in terms of collaboration, right? You know, I'm intrigued, especially in my domain of interactive storytelling. I've always been intrigued with interacting with other storytellers, especially in the field of documentary filmmakers, game designers, architects of physical spaces, technologists that changes the way we interact with each other. I hope we can collaborate in the future to be able to think about how media and public participation can truly collaborate. In fact, one final promotion, sorry. The Agora Journalism Center is actually co-hosting an event next month with Peggy Holman in Journalism That Matters. So it's going to be on October 1st to 4th. It's called Experience Engagement. So if you're in town, or if you love our beautiful city so much that you need a business reason to visit again, fine. So we are gathering journalists, community storytellers, active citizens, students, educators, researchers, funders, social entrepreneurs, and urban designers to really kind of think about the appreciative inquiry of how can journalism and communities thrive together. The second ask, and I'm going to pull this quote directly from Amalia, who mentioned this on Wednesday, is this idea of make the case for someone else's ask before you make the case for your own. And putting this in context with media, I'm reflecting on the challenge that media themselves also needs to work harder in capturing the full story, right? So I would ask this of you, is the next time that media does connect with you, have that question to yourself to say, am I the right person to talk about this story, or is there another champion? Is there a better champion to be able to tell this story? And again, echoing Emmett, in terms of practicing define and qualify for finding that particular voice. And also, if you are talking to journalists, I would also urge you to push a couple of other things. You know, they should be, at the end of your interview, they should be asking, who else should I be talking to? Take them to task on that question. Give them more voices. Give them voices that would not be heard within the same stories. You know, let's not tolerate lazy journalists to be able to like look at another story and find the same sources. That's enough. Let's take the journalists to task to make that happen. And then the final third ask is engage those pursuing the boundaries in creating new forms of journalism. Because to me, that is a world where I truly believe that journalism and participation in civic engagement is key to its own success. So thank you.